jazz standard. Simply arpeggiate and do a pattern over all 86 chords, and then you can play the tune, right? Right? Hi, and welcome to the Saxophone Academy. I'm Dr. Wally Wallace, and if you're interested in saxophone masterclasses and product reviews, please do subscribe and be sure to hit the like button. I could use the dopamine hit. Now today we're talking about how to learn jazz standards, and we're going to use the example of There Will Never Be Another You. We're going to learn how I teach my students to learn the tune and begin to improvise over the tune in a systematic approach using priming, analysis, internalization, recreation, and adaptation. 5 steps to help you really dig in and learn the jazz standard. Now, if the traditional way of learning a pattern and playing it over every chord and then isolating voice leading, if that's worked for you in the past, great. I don't know why you're watching this video then. But for a lot of us, myself included, that wasn't a way that let me really internalize and enjoy playing the standard. I hope this approach will help you. Stick with me and walk the path for a while and see if it's right for you. The weather is fine. Step 1, priming. First things first, let's get out our instrument and set them down. Before you ever start playing, we need to listen. The first step of priming, getting ready to learn a jazz standard, we must listen regularly, often, and listen deeply. Whenever I have a student that's going to play a jazz standard for me, I'll ask them, what's your favorite recording of the standard? And if they can't tell me an answer, I don't want to hear it because it's going to be bad. Listening to any genre or style is a critically important step. So when we listen, let's have a couple of goals in mind. First, we should be able to sing the melody to the tune. It doesn't have to be pitch perfect. You don't have to sound like Ella Fitzgerald when you sing, but you should be able to recreate the melody using basic vocalization. And also, I'm going to recommend being able to sing one chorus of a solo from your favorite recording. And whenever we learn a jazz standard, I have my students use a companion recording, one recording that they really love, hopefully from a great saxophonist, though it doesn't have to be, and we can really internalize the way that soloist plays the melody and also learn that solo and be able to at least hum along to one chorus at the very least before you pick up your horn and start learning that jazz standard. Also, lyrics. We need to know the lyrics of the tune. Not only is it going to help us remember the melody, it really gives us an insight to the affectation of that work of music. So let's learn the lyrics and be able to recite them.
There will be many other nights like this, and I'll be standing here with someone new. There will be other songs to sing, another fall, another spring, but there will never be another you.
Now, you don't have to recite them like Jack Kerouac at a poetry slam, but it'd be a lot cooler if you did. Step 2, analysis. We're going to take a look at the big picture and see what is going on harmonically. Now, glancing at these 32 bars, it can look overwhelming. Then we realize there are 4-bar phrases throughout this piece. There's simply 8 of them, but if we look deeper, the first 3 phrases, the first 3 4-bar phrases are repeated in the second half of the piece. So really, we only have to learn 4 phrases, one of them being slightly altered in the very end. So I like to look at a piece of music not as 32 bars, not as 31 different chords in the piece. There are 31 different chords and There Will Never Be Another You, but simply phrases. There are 4 phrases and they repeat with the last one being different. It's much easier for me to remember a tune in terms of phrases rather than disparate chords as they go by. So then when we apply music theory, I don't want to look at the entire thing at one time and be overwhelmed. And who's going to remember that anyway? Let's take a look at 1 4-bar phrases at a time. So as we learn jazz standards, we need to do it in small, digestible chunks. So when we do the theory, take a look at each phrase. So let's take a look at these first 4 bars, and we see a C major chord. So far, so good. And then it goes to, oh boy. Oh, we got a flat 5 and a flat 9. Well, you know what? I didn't want to learn jazz anyway. Let's go back to reading etudes and playing the Pink Panther. Don't panic. It's simply C major leading to A minor. Now, you may need the help of a teacher to identifying the different key areas at first, But we see this B minor 7 flat 5 and this E 7 flat 9 as simply a minor to 5. It's creating a transition to A minor, the relative minor, the gloomy twin of C major. So we simply have C major going to A minor, and the scales that line up with that are simply C major, then A harmonic minor. And using those two scales, we can outline these chords and more importantly, create melodic phrases just beautifully. So don't panic. So in the first 4 bars, C major, A minor. That's what my brain is thinking while I'm improvising. Now, music theory will be part of our ongoing discussion in our weekly lessons, but having a basic understanding, knowing the key areas in which you're playing in, is important to learning a jazz standard. I don't like to think of a jazz standard as 32 bars or 31 or 86 different chords. I like to think of it as 4, 6, or 8 phrases, depending on the tune, and then I think, which key area is that phrase starting in, and where is it going? That in and of itself really simplifies things and really helps me relax and play melodic phrases, which is my job as a saxophonist, and truly enjoy the process of improvising, not trying to memorize and outline chords as they go by, because the chords create a context. So when we learn music theory, I like to use it to understand the context of where the phrase starts and where the phrase is going. Step 3, internalization. Now, I've said many times before, our job as saxophonists is not to outline chords. That's the job of the rhythm section, and they do a really good job of that. I view our job as saxophonists, which the saxophone is a melodic instrument. We technically can't play chords. We can outline or imply chords. But when I listen to my heroes, I'm hearing melodic phrases. Yes, sometimes those solos can be more vertical than others, and sometimes it does outline or imply a chord, but at the base, I always view our job, and when I hear my heroes play, I'm hearing melodic phrases over chords. That being said, understanding the chords, being able to outline the chords, is important to understand the context and the sound of the chords over which we're building melodies. So let's approach this with manageable chunks rather than outlining 32 chords as they go by. Let's take one phrase at a time. We're going to simply outline the C major and that minor 2-5. And here's where I think we need to start with simply playing the root movement, the base of the chord. Play the name of the chord, which is the root, and simply hear the root motion of that first phrase. Now, I also think that we should be able to sing the root movement of the entire piece. This is a more challenging idea than just singing one phrase at a time, but to really have a jazz standard internalized, it can be helpful to be able to sing the root movement. Learn it 4 bars at a time. Now, vocalization is an important part of musical training. We don't have to be great singers, but we should be able to basically sound using our vocal cords. Some basic ideas in music, it really does help us learn jazz standards. So when it comes to vocalizing root movement, we do need to take this seriously. Now that we've done our due diligence with root movements, let's start outlining the chords. First with simply arpeggios. Now let's fill in the gaps of those arpeggios, creating scales. C major scale to A harmonic minor. Then I really like to create some perpetual motion bebop exercises where then we add the most common surround tones and chromatic alterations, making it sound much more post-1945 and start to build some melodic lines. And at this point, you should be able to hear and feel the chord changes underneath what you're playing. And that will have a big impact on the way that you improvise over these chord changes. So now we're ready to move on to the next step, recreation. Jazz music is a style, is an idiom, and a rich oral tradition. So when we improvise, we're not really pulling anything we want out of thin air that happens to contain the notes implied by the chords. We're not playing alien long melodies over existing chord tones. We have to play in the tradition of jazz. When we improvise, we're improvising in the tradition, if you want to get invited back to play with your jazz combo. So we don't just guess what sounds good over these chord changes, we role model. We start with one existing idea called the melody. So learn the melody to these jazz standards. If you can learn it from a vocalist, great. If you need to pull it out of a lead sheet or the real book, that's okay. We have different amounts of times as we are in different areas of our life, but we learn the melody. And I want you to learn it simply 4 bars at a time. So take the opening melody, the first phrase, and repeat it over and over and over and get an idea of how it feels and how it sounds with those chord changes. And then we start to use our companion recording. Now, I've had my students this month doing Stan Getz' There Will Never Be Another You off the album The Steamer from 1956. 1956, amazing year for jazz. So we listen to that enough that we can then take that first phrase that Stan Getz plays in the solo, play it again and again, and really internalize it and memorize just that first phrase at first. And once that's comfortable and memorized and you've really internalized that phrase, it kind of runs in the background of your head when you're creating new melodies and improvising. And remember, the melody is always a great way to get ideas to play over chord changes. If you're ever not sure what to play, try the melody. Step 5, adaptation. Once you have a phrase from the master from your companion recording, start to adapt it, alter it, tinker with it, experiment with it, become a mad scientist of jazz. That sounds like a very low-paying job. And start to have some fun with it and make it your own. Play the original phrase. If it goes up, try altering it, add some surround tones. Try reducing it to its bare bones, doing a modified Schenkerian analysis. If you know what that means, send me your lunch money because you're a huge nerd. We take the phrase that exists and we make it our own and have some fun with it. So this is the process that has worked very well for me, and I'm finding works very well for my students. And you may be thinking, wait, all this work for one phrase? Dr. Wally, it's going to take me an entire month to learn a jazz standard. Cool. What's the problem with that? Why do we have to be in such a hurry to learn things? So say you need a set list of 12 tunes to go play a gig, and 12 tunes is more than enough to cover a couple of hours taking solos and long bass solos. Okay, scratch the bass solo. Still, maybe you get another horn player to play with you. Say you take an entire year to learn 12 jazz standards. They're going to be truly learned. You are going to appreciate it much more, and I assure you the audience will as well. Learning things deeply and slowly is kind of a skill I think we miss sometimes, myself included in my career, when I thought I've got to know 100 jazz standards, but I never really learned them. I played through them, I played at them, but really internalizing, taking the time to learn something with true mastery, I think will not only learn that tune. You're not just learning There Will Never Be Another You, you're learning the skills and developing your ear and your style that then will apply to many, many other things that you play. So be patient. It also doesn't mean that you can't, in a pinch, buy a real book or some lead sheets and just read off them and play it at a more surface level when you go to a gig. So they're not incompatible. Take some time in your practice to do deep learning, take some time to do some sight reading, and in a pinch, you can use cheat sheets and things like that. There's no rules other than, well, personally, my rule is this needs to be fun, because we're certainly not doing it for the paychecks. Enjoy this art form, do what works for you, but I'm going to highly encourage you to take some time, learn a jazz standard one phrase at a time in a masterful, conscientious way that really digs deeper and develops your skills in your ears and your style as a musician as you go. I think you're going to find it much more satisfying. You're going to have questions. I'm going to do my best to answer them in the comments below. I hope you have a most wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week when we talk about articulation patterns and we get back to playing some Bach cello sonatas. In the meantime, go practice. One phrase at a time.